In this demo, we're going to be walking through creating a custom application for managing employee travel reimbursement requests. This is a nice example of a common business process that can be converted into a fully automated online process in just an hour or two from start to finish. In our example, an employee planning a business trip submits a request for approval of the expenses. His manager is notified and asked to approve the request. The employee enters his final expenses. The accounting team is then notified, and once they reimburse the employee, they change the status of the request to paid. All of the notifications are automatically handled by the system. In this 24-minute demo, we're going to build the application from scratch, showing every mouse click and keystroke to demonstrate how quickly this can be done. We'll go through the following steps. First, we'll create a new table and some fields for the table. Then we'll create a workflow with some notification actions. We'll place the fields on a layout form. Then we'll create a sample record in the table and see how it looks. Then we'll create a custom view for showing the records in the table once they've been created. We'll test the process flow on a given record, and finally, we'll create a chart and a report to show the total travel expenses by department. We're going to start building our project by going to the Table menu and the Setup tab. We select the top-level table tree and select New, and this is going to start building our table for us. It will inherit some fields from that top-level table tree, such as ID and history and so on. All we have to do is give our table a name, and then we're going to pick an icon to be associated with it when it appears in the left pane. And now we're going to build fields. Let me minimize the left pane to give us a bit more room to work with. All the parts of the program can be minimized. We're going to start now by building a short text field, which will be the destination field, telling us where the trip is going to take place. We're going to whip through these field wizards here, just choosing the basic default values that we need. For text fields, we're going to define the length of the field and the size of the input box that will be displayed. So that was one short text field. Now we're going to create a longer text field, and this will be to describe the purpose of the trip. A short text field is limited to 255 characters, while a regular text field can be as long as you like. We'll set it here to 5,000 characters and choose the size of the display box again. Now we're going to create some date fields for the trip start date so that we know when we need to have all our approvals in place. And with the date field, we have many different kinds of default values. In this case, we don't need a default value. We will make the field required so that we can run escalation rules off of it if we need to. That was the trip start date. Now let's do the trip end date. This way we can remind the employee when it's time for him to submit his final expenses after his trip is finished. And again, we're just accepting a lot of default values for these fields. We don't need to make a lot of changes. We're going to do one more date field, which will be the booking deadline. And this is the date by which he needs to have approval so that the prices don't go up for the airfare and so on. So we'll use this in a reminder rule to the manager if the manager hasn't approved by that time. Now we're going to create some currency fields. Currency fields are one of many numeric data types that we have. We have integers, floating point, percentage, currency, and also elapsed time, which is expressed as a number. We just have to choose our display options here for the currency we want to display and whether we want to round or include dollars and cents. We're going to create 5 fields here. Transportation expenses, which we just created, the accommodation expense estimate, which we're creating now, and then 3 more. And as you can see, it is possible to create a field in something like 10 to 20 seconds. That was accommodations. Now we're up to meals. This takes about as long as it takes to type the labels. We're not showing cents here. This is the rounding option I'm just turning off, so we'll just see dollars. Now we're going to add a field for other expenses. When we're all done, we're going to add a field to total up the expenses. We're going to add a button that will do that for us. And when we press that button, we're going to put the value of the field we're going to put the value in the final currency field here, which will be the total estimated expenses. Okay, now we're ready to create a little button, an action button. This is a very useful data type that allows you to run calculations or to launch websites or populate values from the record and so on. It's a very versatile data type. In this case, it's going to run a simple calculation which is going to run an update field action that will add up the values in all those expense fields and put the total in the total estimated expense field. We're going to create the action right now, and this will be the action that actually updates the field that the button will run. We're going to update the total estimated expenses field. We're going to use a formula for that. We're looking now at the Formula Help Wizard, which shows us all the fields in our table so far, and we can just click on each field to select it, and it's copying the field name into that box for the formula in the background here. We're not seeing that happening. When we're done, we'll close this and go back to our formula, and now we can put a plus sign in between each of these field names, and that will cause it to add up the values in these fields and put the total into this field. We have many functions that you can use with formulas. There are some standard functions. You can use regular expressions. You can run formulas on date fields that add days or hours or minutes, and so forth. This is very useful when you're trying to set deadlines or do other actions like that. Now we've saved the action, and with an action button, we usually turn off the visibility of the label so we can just see the button. It looks better that way on the screen, and that's what I'm doing here. And now we're ready to create an append-only text field. This is again a long text field in which each entry is shown with a date and user stamp for the person making the change. All we have to do again is set the size of the input box, and with an append-only field we have some options for the order of the entries that we can define down here. And we're just going to accept the default value here. And let's see, we have one more currency field. That will be the maximum approved. So we're going to allow the person who approves this to set a maximum amount in case the cost changes a bit over the original amount, so that if it does, it doesn't have to go back to him for approval. Okay, this is our final currency field for now. Now we're going to create a set of linked fields for the person who is submitting the travel request. When somebody submits it, we're going to automatically populate his information into the requester fields for his name and his email, his phone number, and his manager. So we're creating what is called a link to selected fields from another table, and we've chosen the employee table as the table we're pulling these fields from. And now we're going to choose the fields that we want to include from that other table for the person who submits the request. What we're seeing here is a list of all the fields in the employee table, and we're able to relabel them to indicate their purpose in this table. So we're just going to rename them requester name, requester phone number, and so forth, to indicate that this is the person who is the requester for this travel request. And once we've selected all the fields, now we can go ahead and move through the field wizard. Again, we're skipping over group permissions as we set up these fields. We would come back later and add the appropriate permissions. We have many default values here. We've chosen the user who creates the record. We're also going to allow somebody to create a record on behalf of someone else. When we choose the display type here, we're going to give the full name a box with lookup display type, so we can actually look up another user and put them in the record. For instance, if somebody's secretary creates the request on their behalf, they could indicate the real person who's the traveler. Now we're going to go and set up a workflow. We're going to choose Workflow from the Setup menu and come over here and select the table. We're starting from a blank slate since this is a brand new table. So what we're going to do is type in the states that we want to use in this table, comma separated into this box. And when we're done adding the states, we simply click the Add States button. Later on, if we want to add more, we can come right back to that box and add some new states, and they will also be added to the screen. Now we can link up these states with the transitions that we want. What we're doing here is drag and drop by selecting a state and hitting the delete key. We're clearing out the transitions we don't want and adding transitions that we do want. from one state value to another, with the purpose being to enable just the process flow that we want through the various states of this request. So we're allowing just the desired transitions to happen. When we save a workflow, we can choose which groups of users can see the actions that might be triggered. And editing a workflow is the same process as creating a new one. We can come back here and add some actions. So you don't have to do everything at once. You can come back at any time and add more actions. What we're doing now is adding an email action when the request is created that will email the manager of the requester and ask him to approve or reject the request. So we're creating an action that has a name, and it's an email action, and now we're going to create the email template that will be sent. The email template editor allows us to address to any field in the record or to any address, any team, and so on. We can also insert field values from the record into the email by looking up the field variables here and populating them, or simply by typing it in. Here, since we just looked up that one, we don't have to look it up again. We can simply type in the value. So this will substitute the requester's name for this field variable when this email is sent. Now we're going to insert a hyperlink in the email. It's possible to insert a hyperlink that will bring the user back into that record to edit the record and also to set any field values in the record as defined here in the hyperlink setup. So we're going to provide two hyperlinks to the manager. One, which when he clicks it will set the status to approved, and another hyperlink which will set it to rejected. So he doesn't actually have to change the status field himself. It will be done for him simply by virtue of him clicking on the appropriate hyperlink. He can still edit it himself if he changes his mind once he's in the record, but we're going to take care of that for him. So depending on which link he clicks, both will bring him into the record and will set the status field to the appropriate value. He can then fill out any additional fields and add notes to it if he wishes. We're also going to choose which fields will be sent in this email. We can choose specific fields or fields based on those that the recipient has the right to view according to his permissions. So we're done now adding the email, and we've added it to this transition, which is the transition for creation. Now we can add some emails to some of the other transitions. So we're going to add an action here that will occur when the status changes to approved by manager. We're going to email the requester telling him that his request is approved. So the process is very similar. We come in, we choose who we want to address the email to. Again, we can insert variables into the email wherever we want them. And we can give the requester the ability to come back in and view his request or edit it. We can choose again fields based on his permission to include. And we'll also give him a link to come back and edit his record later. And in his case, we're not going to change the value of the record because it has been approved. He's not likely to need to update it. Now I'll save that email, and now we'll see it on that transition. Now we're going to add another action to the rejected transition. So if the manager rejects the request, we'll want to email the requester telling him it's been rejected and giving him the opportunity to update. And here you see that we can copy an email so that we don't have to start from scratch each time. You can just come in and quickly edit the words that have changed. Now we're going to give the requester the opportunity to come in through a hyperlink to change his request and to resubmit it for approval again. So we've got the same link. Now we're going to have it set the status back to pending approval when he comes in and edits the request, so that he can, if he wants to, resubmit it for approval by changing the characteristics of the request. Now this email is added to the library and also added to this transition.